Target the Iranian embassy, burning headscarves and calling the regime murderous. Time's running out for Greyhound racing to justify its existence after getting a final warning. What's Minister Kieran McAnulty's plan? He's live. Another report on revamping Aotearoa's ailing health system. So what does this one actually mean? And the Rugby World Cup already has a winner. Financially, Whangarei scoring big time from the competition. And what it means to save a life. Learning CPR can make you an everyday hero too. Check us out, Sky Channel 83. RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahiahi Marie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. The Health Minister says closing the staffing gap is a top priority in the new plan launched today by Health New Zealand and the Māori Health Authority. The plan, named Te Paitata, is intended to be the basis of a major shake-up over the next 2 years. Other priorities include changing services to improve outcomes in maternity care and cancer care, as well as for chronic health conditions and mental illness. Andrew Little says it's a big project.
It is the interim health plan because one of the changes we've made is how we make funding decisions for health. There are a number of things that are emphasised in this plan. Workforce is critical amongst those. And I have to say, working out the pay issues, because there are pay issues.
However, the National Party's health spokesperson Shane Reti says the plan lacks detail.
On this date, we will do this action. Here's how we'll measure success. It's an action plan. In fact, early up in the document, it's just a great discussion, actually, and sort of philosophical views on this, that, and various other things. None of that helps people on waiting lists today.
The Whatu Order is still working on its full-scale plan for the health system. After months of uncertainty and legal argument, Elon Musk has completed his $75 billion takeover of Twitter. The company's chief executive and chief financial officer have left with immediate effect, reportedly fired by the world's richest person. Washington Post reporter Elizabeth Doskin told the BBC Twitter users should now expect rapid changes.
I think we should be prepared for Donald Trump being returned to the platform. I would expect that could happen any day. He's not someone who is a very collaborative decision maker. He's someone who wants to make his choices and have sole control. Whereas before, Twitter was much more ruled by consensus. I think it's going to be less so now.
Elon Musk has tweeted that his interest in the platform is not about making money. The Supreme Court has dismissed a former National Party president's last-ditch fight to keep her name secret in connection with a high-profile trial. Like the High Court and Court of Appeal, it's dismissed Michelle Bogue's bid to overturn a ruling allowing her to be named. Amy Williams reports.
Ms Bogue was named during the trial of a prominent businessman who was jailed for indecently assaulting 3 men and trying to bribe one of them to drop his complaint. Stuff reports the businessman told jurors at the trial he wanted to engage Ms Bogue because she had been recommended as someone who was very good at solving public relations problems. She did not in fact work on the matter. The Court of Appeal last month reserved its decision on an appeal against the sentence and conviction by the businessman who can't be named.
Nelson Mayor Nick Smith has appointed the city's youngest councillor, Rowan O'Neill-Stevens, as his deputy. He announced the decision at the new council's first meeting today. Mr Smith says Mr O'Neill-Stevens brings the energy of youth, the experience of 3 years as a councillor, and a mature mind to the challenges of being deputy mayor. He says he deliberately chose someone of a different political persuasion for balance. So many Wellington rail staff are falling sick from seasonal illnesses that the capital's commuter trains are being cancelled at a high rate. Cancellations have been running at up to 10 services a day out of 400 for the last few weeks, with services to Melling and Lower Hutt the most disrupted. Metlink says it's forewarning passengers as soon as it can, but acknowledges that on-the-ground information about bus replacements can sometimes be confusing. It says if staffing issues persist, it'll adjust services to provide passengers with greater certainty. Metlink has been unable to give RNZ the exact number of total cancellations. To sport now, and initially seen as a clash of title favourites, tonight's T20 Cricket World Cup pool match between Australia and England in Melbourne is now a dance of the desperates. Thrashed by New Zealand in their tournament opener, Australia are a shadow of the side that won the title last year, while England's loss to Ireland has left coach Matthew Mott knowing another loss will all but dash their hopes of making the semis.
For us, it's about a different mindset now. We don't have the luxury now of losing another game. We're playing against the hosts, the defending champions. So there's no need for us as a coaching group to motivate the group. I think they'll take stock, they'll play well and come out firing.
Meanwhile, Wellington have made unwanted cricket history by being dismissed by Canterbury for 80 and 87, the lowest team match aggregate in more than a century of Plunket Shield games. Kiwis coach Michael Maguire is demanding improvement on both attack and defence for the side's last Rugby League World Cup pool match against Ireland. The Kiwis have had 2 comfortable wins over Lebanon and Jamaica, and Maguire's picked his top lineup for tomorrow morning's clash in Leeds.
Our defence needed to be sturdier or stronger at times. And then with the ball, we need to show a bit of patience.
And Captain Sarah Hunter will become the most capped woman in rugby test history on Sunday when she plays her 138th international for England against Australia in the World Cup quarter-finals. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Dame Valerie Adams on why the bronze she won in Tokyo was more than gold to her. New Zealander Darian Woods, ex-Treasury, on his NPR podcast explaining economics. And I think we'll ask him about inflation. And Lucien Rissos on the elaborate secret world created by his uncle, one-time MP Gerald O'Brien. Call Kim Hillaho. Join me tomorrow morning from 8 here on RNZ National.
And we're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. The northern half of the North Island from Taranaki and Taupo northwards, including Bay of Plenty, also Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington. Cloud increasing, isolated showers turning to scattered rain tomorrow. Heavy falls possible later tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine with high cloud. Whanganui, Taihape, Manawatu and also Waded Upper. Cloudy periods, scattered rain late tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, showers turning to rain today. Some heavy falls tomorrow, then easing later. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain with some heavy falls. Thunderstorms possible from tomorrow afternoon. Canterbury, a few spots of rain this afternoon, more extensive rain developing tomorrow, possibly heavy for a time in the afternoon and evening and then clearing. Otago and Southland, scattered showers, mainly in the afternoons and evenings with possible thunderstorms and hail. And for Kohu, the Chatham Islands, occasional rain or drizzle from this evening. The time has just gone 7 minutes past 5. I'll have the news headlines for you at 20 past 5.
That's a cheery weather forecast. Thanks, Evie. Yeah. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai, ki Checkpoint te tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Protesters burned headscarves and passports and defaced the sign outside the Iranian embassy in Wellington today, calling it a terrorist embassy. There have been widespread protests in Iran for weeks in response to the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who died in custody after being arrested for violating the country's dress code. This week, our government was accused of pulling its punches and condemning Iran's crackdown on protesters while it negotiated the release of 2 travel bloggers detained in Iran. Today in Wellington, around 50 people demonstrated outside the embassy and called on the international community to do more. Our political reporter, Annika Smith, was there.
Freedom, freedom! Freedom, freedom! Freedom, freedom! Freedom, freedom!
The blinds were shut at the Iranian embassy today, but protesters made themselves heard on the road outside. These Iranian women say they're fighting for basic human rights.
We have to do something. We can't just sit around and watch our country in chaos.
They must go. They must go. The regime of Iran, Islamic regime, must go.
We just want our basic human rights. We want our basic human rights. We've been wanting a basic human rights for 43 years. We are tired.
Embassy, terrorist embassy!
One last embassy, terrorist embassy!
Women burned headscarves outside the embassy today, while the building's gold sign was torn down, stomped on and covered with red paint. They want the Iranian ambassador expelled and those supporting the regime sanctioned. The government has filed a motion formally condemning Iran now that New Zealand couple Topher Richwhite and Bridget Thackeray have escaped safely. But Green MP Golriz Gutterman says this must be followed by action.
Now there is no imagined or real impediment to us actually taking action, and it is our responsibility to do that. We need to come into line with the rest of the world when action on Iran is concerned. And there are these very specific actions that we can take that will hurt the people most responsible for this violence and oppression.
Ms Gutterman wants the assets, bank accounts and travel of individuals supporting violence in Iran frozen. Protester Sarah says the regime's funders need to be cut off.
The sanctions we've been having in the past are not getting to the mullahs, are not getting to the power. They're putting normal people like me and you on their knees and worse.
But Acting Prime Minister Grant Robertson says the government isn't actively considering sanctions.
That's a matter that will always be considered, but at the moment I'm not aware of any specific proposal.
Iranian protester Negan Dazgabe says New Zealand needs to be on the right side of history.
The international community has to step up. They've just been sitting around watching, saying bullshit. If they don't do anything, it's on them.
Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta says the government will continue to stand up for the rights of women in Iran, but it's up to the Iranian leadership to bring a peaceful end to the civil unrest.
And that was Annika Smith. It is 5:10. Kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A 4-year council term giving 16-year-olds the right to vote and increase the pay for councillors. They're all suggestions from a draft report into the future of local government. Our video journalist Sam Rillstone went out to see what some voters think of the proposed changes.
I would be pro lowering the voting age to 16. I think about how politically engaged I was as a 16-year-old, and I think it would be okay. I feel like you're able to do a lot of other things. You're able to pay taxes.
Don't know, haven't thought about that one, to be honest, but would it make a difference? I don't know that would make a difference, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think that will help get voter turnout increased.
At what age does your opinion start mattering? 16, 12, 5? I don't know.
Why not? I think they've got the intelligence these days to know what they want and have a voice.
Raising pay for councillors to encourage more people to put themselves forward?
No. I think most of them are overpaid now, to be honest. There's how many people in council earning over 100k a year? I mean, to me, it's a service job.
I think the influence of business on the councillors and their contacts that they can make to better their careers is a bigger issue. So I would say I'm happy increasing the pay as long as they cannot double dip on other business activities.
They're being asked to do a lot. Money is one kind of compensation.
I kind of like the idea of putting yourself for government being somewhat vocational as well. I mean, I feel like there'll be other jobs where I feel like financial incentive may be more imperative than being a local councillor.
Well, if they're doing it for the money, that's not a good reason, so not agreed.
Increasing the term from 3 to 4 years.
I think that's a good idea. I think it gives you more time to create change. I might feel different if I wasn't so comfortable with the council we currently have. I might feel differently. But
I'm agnostic as to whether changing the length of the pendulum arc would do much, if anything. I don't know.
Positives and negatives to both sides of that?
I think 3 years is probably a better term, to be honest.
I don't know, that might be a bit long, 4 years, if they're not good at their job.
Appointing mana whenua alongside Māori wards to allow greater involvement in decision making.
Yeah, totally. I'm so excited about the establishment of the Māori ward, but I feel like there's definitely more we can do. I'm really excited to see what Nico will do in Wellington. But yeah, I think working with mana whenua is to be truly te tiriti centric, it's entirely necessary, and I'd be very supportive.
Definitely, I mean, it's representation, isn't it? Right, so it should represent all the people.
Bigger inclusion of representation of every demographic is better for everybody, yeah.
Don't have an opinion on any of that because I just don't know.
A diversity of perspective enlarges all of us. Hey?
So some views there from out on the streets. Let us know what you think about those proposals. So the suggestion is extend the term from 3 years to 4 years, allow 16-year-olds to vote, and look at the pay that elected councillors, mayors get. Interesting, isn't it? Let us know what you think. Text us on 2101 or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie, 16-year-olds voting. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think they should be able to vote, absolutely. I think it's the only way forward.
Yeah, they can leave school, they can have a job, they pay tax.
And also they're inheriting a bit of a mess, so they should be able to have a say on it.
Yeah, and on the subject of pay, just so that we give you a bit of an idea, I've printed off some of the pay rates. It's clearly big news. I've got it on A3 paper here by accident. But these are for the Auckland Council. So the mayor, there's been a bit of publicity around this, $296,000 is the annual salary, effective from the day after the official election result is declared. Deputy Mayor in Auckland, that is decided, according to the website, by the newly elected governing board. So the council decides that, councillors. Councillors, it's considered a full-time job. They say 40 hours a week or more, with proposed annual pay of around $107,000. Local board members, that's considered part-time, 12 to 24 hours a week. The proposed annual salary they put there is $30,000 to $53,000. Mayor and Deputy Mayor are considered full-time jobs, by the way. So do let us know your thoughts. And obviously that's going to vary. Those salaries are going to vary from different towns and cities. Time is running out for Greyhound racing to justify its existence after the government put the industry on notice more than 12 months ago. It has until the end of the year to get more transparent and make animal welfare a priority after reports highlighted serious concerns about high injury and death rates in dogs. But the SPCA is calling for an end to Greyhound racing altogether, saying it's cruel and doesn't deserve any more chances. And it's encouraging people to write to the Racing Minister, Kieran McAnulty, and tell him exactly that. Well, the Minister is off to the Greyhound races in Cambridge this weekend and he joins us now. Kia ora, Minister.
Kia ora, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. So the SPCA would like Greyhound racing banned outright. What consideration are you giving to that?
Well, I've met with them and I've met with SAFE recently as well. I'm keeping an incredibly open mind throughout this process. It wouldn't be a fair process if I was treating it any different. So until we get that final report from the Racing Integrity Board, I'm engaging with stakeholders from across the industry, across the spectre of this issue, just to get their perspective. So I've got that insight when I get that final report.
Okay, so an open mind, but what are your initial impressions, having heard from the SPCA and other animal rights groups?
Well, their position's very clear. They don't think that greyhound racing can be justified in any form, and I respect that view. But ultimately, when we get the report, we'll be looking at two options, really. One is that can we justify, or can the greyhound industry justify continuing, and under what form? Obviously not the status quo. It's clear that there needs to be improvements, and so therefore under what conditions can it continue, or the alternative is that it be banned.
So an outright ban is still an option for you. It's on the table along with those other options.
Absolutely. That was the intent of the very clear message that was sent by the previous racing minister ravely 16 months ago. They are on notice and they had 18 months to demonstrate some clear improvement across various factors, and they've been required to engage with the Racing Integrity Board throughout. Now, I've been getting regular updates, quarterly updates from the Racing Integrity Board as to how they're tracking, and the greyhound industry has shown some improvements in some areas, but I remain concerned about others, but I won't be speaking.
What other areas are you concerned about, Minister, still?
Well, injury rates, obviously. We want to, if there's any sport that involves animals, we need to make sure that all provisions are taken to reduce injuries as much as possible. We need to make sure that the conditions in which the sport operates is fair to the animals and safe to the animals, and it has animal welfare at the forefront of its mind. But I don't want to go into any great detail because I don't want to be seen to be having a preconceived idea here. Like I said,
we're just discussing some of the facts, Minister, and when you mention injuries, right, and that's an area that you still have concerns about. The SPCA put out some figures recently. It said 920 injuries to dogs this racing season and 10 dogs killed as a result of injuries caused on the track. How much collateral damage do you think is okay in a industry?
There's obviously going to be some element where in any society, in any sport that involves animals, where there is a level of acceptance on certain number of injuries or whatever is acceptable.
So where's your line in the sand? If 920 injuries this season and 10 dogs have to be put down because of injuries caused on the track, what level are you comfortable with?
Well, I'm uncomfortable with where it is at the moment, but to be fair, I'm not going to set a limit right now when I haven't seen the final report. Part of keeping an open mind is not putting myself into a position where I can be accused of taking a position before we've seen the report. Like I said, I've met with SAFE and SPCA, but that's why I'm also going to a race day and engage with the participants, because if I didn't, when we made a decision, I would be accused of only taking one side. I'm taking this very seriously and I'm listening to everyone that's involved.
Sure. The government has previously said that this industry's social licence to operate is under challenge, right?
Correct.
And the SPCA commissioned an independent survey. I think it was about more than 1,300 people who were surveyed. And as I say, it was an independent survey carried out by a reputable company. And the results of that were more than 70% of the people surveyed said they would vote in a referendum to ban greyhound racing. Does that not indicate to you that the industry's social licence is up, gone?
It certainly demonstrates that this is an issue that people have pretty strong views about, and that's the sort of thing that part of what we will have to take into consideration when I put it forward a recommendation to Cabinet after we receive that final report. But we did give the industry 18 months, and it's only fair that I let them have the full time to make as much improvements and identify all the areas in which they need to address before any decision is made. Everyone's willing and able and free to put forward their perspectives now, and I'm listening, but I'm not going to make a decision until I get that final report from the independent body that's assessing their improvements.
Going to be betting on the races this weekend? The dog races?
No, I won't be. It's done. A race, it's an open day at a racetrack, so there won't be any punting, but I still wanted to go down and talk to the people that are involved, because let's be honest, so if we do decide to ban this industry, there's going to be a lot of good people that treat their dogs well that are going to be impacted. And there's also considerations like, what do we do with all the dogs? We don't want to create an animal welfare issue when we're trying to address another animal welfare issue. This is a big decision, and a lot of things need to be taken into consideration, and I think it's only fair that I talk to everyone that's involved first.
Appreciate your time, Minister. That is the Minister for Racing, Kieran McAnulty there. It is 21 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback, and there's lots for you to get in touch about. What do you reckon about councillors' wages? Should they go up? 16-year-olds? Give them the right to vote. And greyhound racing. Let the industry continue or get rid of it altogether. Text us on 2101 and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time to get to the headlines now. Anea Iwi mena pita pita kōrero.
The Health Minister says closing the staffing gap is a top priority in the new plan launched today by Health New Zealand and the Māori Health Authority. The plan is intended to be the basis of a major shake-up over the next 2 years and identifies key areas of concern such as maternity care, cancer care, chronic health conditions and mental illness. But the National Party's Shane Reti says the plan lacks detail. Elon Musk has completed his takeover of Twitter and immediately fired 2 top executives. The purchase brings to a close a 9-month saga since Mr. Musk first began buying shares in Twitter. The deal is worth about $75 billion, and shares in Amazon have tumbled after the world's biggest online retailer issued a gloomy financial update, adding to fears for the global economy. So many Wellington rail staff are falling sick from seasonal illnesses that the capital's commuter trains are being cancelled at a high rate. Cancellations have been running at up to 10 services a day out of 400 for the last few weeks, with services to Melling and Lower Hutt the most disrupted. And Brazil's presidential challenger, the left-wing Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, known as Lula, has pledged that if he wins this weekend's election, he'll halt deforestation in the Amazon. The country votes for a new president on Sunday in the final round of a polarising election that's been described as the most important in the country's democratic history. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, there's a serious crash on State Highway 29 near the top of the Kaimai Ranges. Police say there are serious injuries and there'll be significant disruptions to traffic while emergency services are there. Motorists are asked to avoid the area or expect significant delays. I'll have more news headlines and possibly traffic news at 5:40.
Ngā mihi, Evie. We've got some, important breaking news here. Ice cream lovers are about to notice two Tip Top favourites missing from the supermarket freezer. Tip Top is discontinuing its 2-litre cookies and cream and Goody Goody gumdrops. What?
Not Goody Goody gumdrops.
Yep, apparently so. Tip Top director Ben Schur says there are significant cost pressures relating to these two items.
Was that not on your big news sheet?
No, it's not on my big news sheet, but it should be. And it cannot continue the flavours in the format without sacrificing the quality. The two flavours will continue in scoop shops, and cookies and cream, don't care so much about cookies and cream, will continue in other product formats such as Trumpet Colossal Cone, Memphis Meltdown, and Capity Tubs in multi-packs. He says they'll continue to look for options to make the flavours available. I'm outraged. Goody Goody Gumdrop. Again for Kiwis in a tip-top tub format in supermarkets.
It's a marketing ploy.
At the same quality that they know and expect. Apparently, vanilla, boysenberry and hokey pokey are the most popular. I don't know.
Simple is always best, you know.
I do.
Really?
Absolute classics.
What's complicated about Goody Goody Gumdrop?
Well,
it's a bit
there's
of green
fair
ice
bit
cream and
going
a few gums in it.
I've always felt it's a little bit overrated as an ice cream. I mean, good, but
as an ice
not
cream,
the
it does
best.
shout at you. It's got all the
There's
stuff
a lot going
in it.
on. If you just want, just a simple ice cream after dinner and you don't want anything too much happening.
It's got two flavours.
You're not going for Goody Goody Gumdrop.
French
Goody and
vanilla.
gumdrop.
Pokey,
French vanilla has grace.
Okay, we need to know what people think about this. 2101, do they share my outrage over the discontinuing of Goody Goody Gumdrop? As, you can't get it in the freezer. You're not going to be able to get it in the freezer at the supermarket. What is the best ice cream in your view? 2101 on text. I did do a small social experiment once where I got the container of Goody Goody Gumdrop and counted the gumdrops in it. That was a gross
So
disappointment.
you had to suck off all the ice cream to get to the drops.
I'm down with that. But it was a disappointment, I have to say, in terms of ratio. That is a whole other issue, but let me know what you reckon about that too. Same with hokey pokey. You got to dig down deep to get all the goodness out these days, if you can find it. Anyway, let's get on to sport, which is what Clay is actually here
My
for.
favourite's already gone. Gold Rush.
Gold Rush. What's that?
Well, I think it's gone. I haven't seen it for ages. It's like a yellowy kind of flavour.
I know,
and
you've lost me already.
Had the chocolate little hokey pokey bits in it, sort of covered. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Good.
No.
So.
Okay, well, the Black Caps, they got thumped by the Black Caps last weekend, and now COVID-19 is ramping up the pressure on the Australian cricket team at the T20 World Cup. A second player in the Australian side has tested positive for the virus ahead of tonight's crucial match against England in Melbourne. Here with more is sports reporter Clay Wilson. They can still play, can't they, Clay, with the,
So one player
COVID?
already has. Ireland had a player play the other day, and the ICC regulations, they've obviously got ways of measuring the players in terms of their infection levels, I assume, I don't know, but they're allowed to play. And it looks like the second player, anyway, that Australia have lost is probably going to be able to play, only has mild symptoms and all the noises that he's going to play in this game tonight. But either way, it's not a great position for Australia to be in. They already had one player earlier in the week test positive for COVID. And they're coming off that big loss to New Zealand in the opening game. The host, defending champions on home soil, I've got all sorts of pressure. This game tonight against England now becomes a very important game. But getting back to this player they've got with COVID, he's a wicketkeeper. And
Yeah, you only got one, haven't they?
Because what happened is before the tournament, their other wicketkeeper, he cut his hand playing golf. A golf club snapped in his hand. So there's all sorts going on for the Australian cricket team here. So they only had one, and they're talking about David Whangārei, our great friend, or some other players, perhaps might wicket keep for the Australian team, but it looks like Matt Wade probably will play. Either way, not ideal in what is a big game. Both Australia and England, under a lot of pressure here too, because England had a loss to Ireland. So there's a bit on this game tonight. So we'll see what happens. But
Yeah, my mind is still back with the fact that they can play. I mean, that raises a heap of issues, doesn't it? Because, I don't know if you've talked to people who've had COVID. Fatigue is a big issue, right? So the players got fatigue. And then you've got them out there mixing with everybody else. I know it's a big open space, but again, you potentially could wipe out a few more players.
Well, we did see it, I think, in the Women's Cricket World Cup that was here in New Zealand. There were players that did play because obviously the ICC, which governs cricket, has got certain ways of measuring that. And, the spectrum of where you get COVID can be you don't feel it at all to, you're stuck in bed for a week. So I guess this is the way they're doing it, and
proof is in the pudding, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay, Black Caps, they're keeping on their toes, are they, ahead of their next match?
Yeah, well, there's been some unexpected results, like in the opening week of the tournament, and then even since the real main part of the tournament started. I mentioned England losing to Ireland, us beating Australia, New Zealand beating Australia was an upset. Pakistan last night lost to Zimbabwe, so New Zealand play Sri Lanka tomorrow night, and a team that you wouldn't say are easy beats. So these kind of results that have been happening have the Black Caps fairly wary that they need to be on their game, and they want to make the most of that when they got against Australia to stay on top of the group and hopefully get through to the semi-finals. So important they do stay on their game and win that match tomorrow night. And before I go, a bit of history in the domestic cricket in New Zealand today. The Plunket Shield, 4-day competition's been going for over 100 years, and Wellington today made a record they will not want to remember. The lowest total across a match, 167 runs across their 2 innings. So a bit of unwanted history for Wellington.
Walk of shame.
Yes, a little bit.
Okay, Clay, thank you. Clay Wilson, the guy who thinks some ice cream flavour called Gold Rush is the best. I'm not sure that we can trust him. Thank you, Clay. More and more people are turning to tiny houses as a way to get onto the property ladder, and skyrocketing demand means there's a 6-month delay in getting a tiny home at the moment. Our reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi went for a look to see what you get for your money.
This is the tiny home life.
If you've got a spot with an amazing view, you can sit in the bed and look out. So they've got the big, entry door, lots of storage for clothes and accessories and things like that.
Whether it's an all-in-one cabin or a 2-storey mini family home, the downsized lifestyle is drawing huge interest.
The tiny houses are roughly 30 square metres in size, with designers having to get creative to fit the bedroom, living room, kitchen and bathroom.
The average cost to build a home is around $130,000. Around 14,000 people are expected to come for a look at the expo over the next 3 days. These potential buyers eyeing up a new way of life.
Rent is quite expensive nowadays in New Zealand, so just like, it's a cheaper way of living, and decluttering as well. When you have a massive house here, you accumulate so much stuff.
Space, land, house costs. We've still got a house full of teenagers, so maybe in another 5 years, yeah.
Got a big section down Coromandel, and we want to build on the back. The daughter wants a house, the grandson wants a house, so we're looking for a couple actually. You've got everything in them that you want, and it's less maintenance.
It's just weighing our options out, but definitely an option to get on the property ladder at least.
I've been living minimalist for the last few years, and I don't feel the need to live in a big house anymore.
Turn into a double bed, so if you do have guests.
Charla May is one of the directors of Tiny Homes NZ. She used to own a house in Whangarei, but 5 years ago she built her first tiny home. She's now living off-grid in a house bus with a cabin for her office, with no regrets.
I pretty much worked to pay my mortgage and spent my weekends renovating and upkeeping my house. I can get my house clean within an hour and have the whole weekend to go kayaking and on road trips, and so it's just the freedom and flexibility it gives you.
Director Rebecca McLean has designed a few tiny homes herself. She says COVID is behind a lot of the interest.
So it made them go, well, actually, what are we doing in this big house that we don't use? And we've got guest bedrooms for the guests that we see once a year.
Though the minimalist lifestyle takes a bit of getting used to.
So they will bring in just what they need and then leave in their storage what they think they want, and then if they don't need that, then they let that go. So it is a process because there are things that you're emotionally attached to as well. So some things can be built in, so specialty china cabinets and nanas this and that. So there is nice things that we can also, you don't have to get rid of your whole life.
But to have a tiny house, you need land to put it on. That's why Charla created Landshare for potential tiny house owners to match with landowners.
With the cost of living going up and mortgage rates and that, people are now catching on that they can earn a passive income by renting out a little pocket of their land that they're not really using, getting a few $100s a week coming in by having someone renting it out with their tiny house.
70% of their listings are in Auckland. But Charla says it's not an even playing field, with councils treating tiny houses differently in each region.
Can you imagine having a driver's licence and you have a driver's licence in Auckland to drive a car, but then you go down to Waikato and suddenly your driver's licence isn't valid down there. You can't drive your car down there. That's what the tiny house industry faces. And so what we'd like to do is work with legislators to create a national piece of legislation so it's one rule for the whole country.
More guidance on both fixed and trailer-mounted tiny homes is expected from MBIE in the future.
And if you were listening to that story from Louise and Marika, do check out the video online. Some really interesting places there. I don't know about the storage though, and where you put your shoes, where someone like Nona Peltier puts all her Doc Martens. Don't reckon there's enough room there for her. We'll maybe find out later. Iwi in Hastings want to transform an old fruit packers lodge on police land into a revolutionary space to keep whānau out of prisons. But they're struggling to get support from the council because it backs on to flash new housing developments. Our reporter in Te Mato a Maui, Hawke's Bay, Tom Kitchen, has the story.
Omahu Road is a busy arterial route through Hastings. It's by the expressway, the main road to Napier and home to Hawke's Bay Hospital. It's also where the Fruit Packers Lodge is, a quiet space which has been a home away from home for many RSE workers. The property recently changed hands to police, who have been working with iwi on a development they hope will be a game changer for whānau battling the justice system. Local Māori midwife Jean Tahuia explains the vision.
We're mainly thinking about our children and stopping the cyclic movement of our children through state care into the justice system and into prison.
The idea is for the hundreds of rooms to become places where providers can give live-in support to those who have been arrested or charged by police. There will be kaupapa Māori services like health, budgeting, support for mama and pepe, and pathways for them to find jobs and stay out of prison. Nahiwi Tomoana is ex-chair of local iwi Ngāti Kahungunu and has worked closely with the Deputy Police Commissioner for Iwi and Communities, Wally Homaha, on this. Although Mr Tomoana says it's not their idea.
We just picked up the vision of the Peter Sharples and the Rose Petties and the Tom Hemmelpaws and the Mona Jacksons, who said that we had to deinstitutionalise prisons and we had to bring our people into the community.
That's the focus, having people living in the city, not out near the prison, as Jean Tahuia says.
You need to be where facilities are available to them rather than hide them away in some rural, isolated area where there's no support.
Talks have started with Hastings District Council, and Nahiwi Tomoana says it's looking askance at the idea.
Oh, I think they're a bit nervous about this being right in the middle of town. But if it's not right in the middle of town, you might as well keep it in prison, you know. It has to be in community from whence they came.
It backs onto some flash new homes and building sites, which developers are promoting as desirable, premium and a safe community for families. Current Ngāti Kahungunu Chair Baden Barber hopes that iwi's vision will change the council's mind.
The council does have, some reservations, about proximity to some new developments over the road there. But I think it's about relationships. It's about sitting down with council.
In a statement, Hastings Mayor Sandra Hazelhurst says the site is zoned for residential housing, not remand or custody-style accommodation. She says people have made investment choices based on the land zoning, and any development on residential land should be residential.
It is 24 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National, and it's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier, who joins us now live in the studio. Part of business is ice cream. It's a commercial entity and things, Nona, so hit us with your favourite flavour.
Well, I don't eat ice cream.
What?
So, I go to the dairy-free section because that's what I eat. The
like
dairy-free. No, I don't like those. No, I don't like that. I buy the fake dairy. It's like dairy, but it's not. It's all about,
What's the favourite flavour then?
I'll take whatever's there.
Okay.
I'm easy that way.
I'm confused by this.
Anyway. You're lucky that you get to have your favourite. You might go and stock up before they take away
Good
your
point,
favourite.
Nona. There might be a rush on at the freezer.
Yeah, could be.
Okay, let's talk about weak consumer confidence. I feel like we talk about this a lot, but apparently you're telling us it may have hit rock bottom according to the latest survey. Does that mean we're going to bounce back up again?
I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
But I would say this, that the ANZ Roy Morgan survey that they do with the ANZ Bank has found the Consumer Confidence Index has been unchanged now for the third consecutive month at 85.4. Now, the long run average is 120, so it's got a long way to go up. And at the moment, consumers are still saying that it's not the best time to buy a major appliance, although it's slightly improved from September. Well, what's interesting is the economists looking at this are suggesting that what consumers say about how they feel and what they do are different. In other words, they're still spending their money, even though they're saying they're not going to. So there you go. What does it really mean these days? All the economic indicators seem to be mixed up.
Okay, let's talk about the casino operator, Sky City Entertainment. And it's had a strong start to the year. Now, you were telling us earlier in the week about the car park troubles.
I know, isn't that terrible that that fire just continues to make it difficult for Sky City. But the tourism has returned to the city. Auckland and Hamilton are both reporting more activity, and that's translating into a better result for the first quarter. However, Sky City is still taking a really cautious approach about the overall outlook. And because it's so unsettled, they're not prepared to even provide a guidance on what they think will happen for the rest of the year. But given that the first quarter, they say underlying profit was about 10% above pre-COVID levels. So that's a very positive sign for the casino. But they've got a long way back because they've been affected like any other tourism industry. Hospitality is the double whammy there for them.
And what can you tell us about the market numbers, Nona?
Interestingly, the top 50 index had ended up 0.25%. And that's pretty good because we saw Asia slip back a little bit. And the New Zealand, so we finished 0.25% up, 29-point gain to 11,130. The Kiwi is trading at 58.7. Wow. So it's creeped up like a single point. Yeah. US cents, 90.6 Australian and 50.6 British pence. So a little bit of a perk up there for the Kiwi.
Thanks, Nona. Nona, no thanks for the ice cream, Nona. It is 20 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaro, I'm still back at the whole Nona doesn't like ice cream situation. But anyway, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program, including the end to Goody Goody Gumdrop ice cream and cookies and cream. Also, whether 16-year-olds should be able to vote. And if you reckon Greyhound Racing's time is over, 2101 on text, or get in touch about anything else you've heard on the program that's piqued your interest. Our email is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines. Ko Evie Anō tēnei.
The Minister of Health, Andrew Little, says the government's new National Health Plan will address workforce shortages by getting people in from overseas. Other priorities of the 2-year plan include changing services to improve outcomes in maternity care and cancer care, as well as for chronic health conditions and mental illness. Iwi and Hastings want the local council to support plans to transform a fruit packers lodge into accommodation for people in trouble with law. The police and Ngāti Kahungunu are working on what they hope will be a game changer for those caught up in the justice system. But the Hastings District Council believes custodial style accommodation should be elsewhere. In a wide-ranging speech, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has warned that the world faces the most dangerous decade since the end of World War II. Mr. Putin accused the West of nuclear blackmail against Russia to force allies to turn away from Moscow. The new Christchurch mayor says there are more important things the council should be spending money on rather than upgrading the streets around the new Central City Stadium. A proposed upgrade to the streets will be put on hold despite consultation starting weeks ago. And thanks to the Women's Rugby World Cup, some Whangārei businesses are the busiest they've been since pre-COVID times. The Black Ferns face off against Wales in the quarterfinal tomorrow night in the city. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Thank you, Evie. Let's get to some of your feedback now. Lots of it coming in. Should we start with the ice cream flavours? Why not? This person says, I'm with you. So disappointing. Goody Goody Gumdrops is my favourite. Good on you. Totally share your dismay regarding Goody Goody Gumdrops. I don't think I could feel worse with this COVID, but suddenly I do. Another person says, rum and raisin is my favourite. No.
Oh, yeah.
Rum and raisin?
That's a generational thing, I think.
Okay, rum and raisin. All right, cookies and cream second. Okay, well, at least you've got a fallback position because cookies and cream's the gone burger as well. As long as we can still get boysenberry ripple, this person says, I will be satisfied. Yeah, I don't understand this because they're saying it's cost precious, right? But I would have thought some of the ice creams with berries in them would...
I can feel a protest coming, Lisa.
Yeah. I'll make a sign. We'll see what happens. GGGD is the best. Tomorrow I will be trawling the local supermarkets with a chili bin and buy as many as I can. R.I.P. the best ice cream ever, Kat. Kat, what town are you in? Because we're going to be in direct competition to each other. And this person says, so disappointing that Goody Goody Gumdrop ice cream is being discontinued. My little granddaughters will be devastated, and so will I. The ice cream debate is really important, says this person, but why can't we get chocolate derby? What is chocolate derby like we used to? Someone explain this to me. Anybody know?
No idea.
Chocolate derby? No idea. It's very concerning.
Donuts and chocolate?
I don't know, but it's all in capital letters, so it must be a serious situation. Bring back chocolate derby in the dairies. Passionately concerned Trevor of North Canterbury. Trevor, can you please enlighten us? Get back in touch. What is a brown chocolate derby? Chocolate derby. Someone else says, goody goody gumdrops, yuck. Oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to read the rest of what you've said, but okay. Vanilla or hokey pokey, now we're talking. Yes, I agree regarding hokey pokey. As kids, we used to, lick them out of the ice cream and stack up the little nuggets of hokey pokey on the armchair.
And then push them up each other's noses.
Not that. Kapiti Fijoa or kiwi fruit and honey. Had one in the late 90s, early 2000s, best ice cream ever. Tip Top French Vanilla is incredibly good for a simple, common-made ice cream.
Super.
Rush Monroe ice cream, also very good. This person is a real connoisseur. New Zealand is very good for ice creams as well as for chocolate. Pity we can't do better with canned soups. Wow, that's a real juxtaposition. That's Richie from Northland. And Mike says, baby boomers know rum and raisin is the true quality vintage ice cream. Okay, and they're saying that Goody Goody Gumdrops is the childish whim of the younger generation. Thank you, I'm flattered. Thank you, Mike. And someone else says, I think a more nefarious discussion topic might be why does ice cream melt quicker than it used to? Does it? Maybe that's an experiment we can do on Checkpoint. It seems to separate into a syrup. Why is it easier to scoop? The spoon used to bend. The tubs are still 2 litres in volume, but it seems like ice cream is more aerated. Okay, so weight-wise, we receive less for the same or rising price. I feel like this is the same issue for baked goods, biscuits, etc., which seem to have less substance and are less crumbly. Yeah, that's interesting. Sort of creep where the packet gets slightly smaller and you don't quite notice it, but the price remains the same. Do keep your feedback coming. Clearly, you have strong views on all of this. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The Women's Rugby World Cup is doing wonders for host city Whangarei, with some businesses saying they're the busiest they've been since before the pandemic. The Black Ferns face off against Wales in the quarterfinal tomorrow night, and hospitality, accommodation and retail staff are preparing for another influx of fans. Sam Ollie is there.
Fans young and old are loving the buzz around the Rugby World Cup.
My son was up at Labour Weekend from Hamilton and he was really disappointed that it's not in Hamilton. But I said, no, it's good for us. It's good for all our shops and everything. It's great. Yeah, no, I really love it up here.
Just looking forward to a couple of exciting games. They should be really cool.
It's just amazing. It's what Whangarei needs. Gives a bit of a boost. But it's just been incredible and we've been to several games. And of course, we'll be barracking for the girls on Saturday night.
Among those counting down to kick-off is Whangarei mum Nina Cameron. Her son has been a ball boy in pool matches.
He's absolutely loved it, because obviously me playing women's rugby, he thinks women rugby is just the best. Yeah, he's thriving.
The price point seems to have encouraged fans. $5 tickets for children, 10 for adults, and at least 13,500 have been sold, meaning it's closing in on a sellout. Northlander Portia Woodman's whānau were thousands of kilometres away when the women's team won Olympic gold last year. But at this pinnacle event, she's delighted to be home seeing family in the stands.
Oh, definitely. All of Ngāpuhi are coming down. They tried to come down last weekend, but I wasn't playing, so...
The Northland Chamber of Commerce doesn't have an exact financial forecast, but President Tim Robinson says the Cup is putting millions into the city's economy.
Hospitality and accommodation are having an absolute ball of the time, which is fantastic.
And the upturn is finally an exciting change from pandemic-related lulls in Te Tai Tokiro.
People, for the first time really in 2.5 years, are actually feeling confident to go out and just spend time out and about. And I think certainly we notice a lot of that here in retail.
That's also the case at the Butter Factory Bar and Bistro, where games play through huge screens and speakers, and flags line the walls and ceilings. The business has been so busy, owner Luke Revel has opened a second venue upstairs for the tournament.
On average, our food sales are up about 30% to between 30 and 50%.
And staff like Jackie Edwards have had the thrill of catering for not only rugby supporters, but many of the players themselves, including the entire Fijian team.
It's very, very humbling, to be quite honest. They're just such lovely people, and then on other days we'll have like 6 or 8 of all the different teams, and plus their liaison managers.
The weather's expected to be drizzly tomorrow, with a high of 23 degrees in Whangārei and kick-offs at 7:30.
The first ever National Health Plan has been released by government agencies, aiming for a huge shake-up over the next 2 years. It's big on ideas such as changing the way the sector gets workers, and with more focus on te tiriti or waitangi. Critics say it lacks detail, but the Health Minister says that's not the point. Our reporter Tom Kitchen was in Taupo at the launch.
A kānanga welcoming Health Minister Andrew Little and the country's top health leaders to Taupo Hospital today. They were there to launch Te Pai Tata, the country's first national health plan, led by the new agencies Te Whatu Ora or Health New Zealand and Te Aka Whai Ora, the Māori Health Authority. Andrew Little says it's a big project.
So this sets out a range of tasks that reflect very much priorities today, but also the first steps of reorienting and to some extent rebuilding the system that we've got so that we don't find ourselves repeating the kind of circumstances that we're in today.
But away from the limelight of the launch, National's health spokesperson Shane Rete says the plan is virtual signalling and is light on detail.
On this date, we will do this action. Here's how we'll measure success. It's an action plan. In fact, early up in the document, it's just a great discussion, actually, and sort of philosophical views on this, that, and various other things. None of that helps people on waiting lists today.
But Mr Little says the system Labour inherited from National was incapable of doing its job and its targets failed.
We inherited a health system that had buildings literally with shit running down the walls. I don't know what target they were operating to allow that to happen. I don't know what target they were operating to that meant we now have a workforce that simply does not have the numbers to do the job.
The plan will replace 20 different district annual plans from the old health boards. What kinds of things does this new plan focus on? There's ideas to improve maternity and cancer care, as well as chronic health and mental illness. And Mr Little says a big one is addressing workforce shortages by getting people in from overseas.
In terms of our recruitment offshore, it's no longer distributed amongst 20 different entities and a whole bunch of different organisations in the private sector. One organisation doing right at the beginning from attracting, recruiting, processing and getting them where they need to be.
The chairs of the new health agencies spoke at the launch. Te Aka Whai Ora chair Tipa Mahuta says she's thinking about how the service could improve outcomes for her mokopuna or grandchildren.
My biggest mahi today is to the mokopuna here, because in her lifetime she will have a different health narrative. Yeah, she will know how and where to access services for herself and for her future tamariki mokopuna.
Te Whatu Ora chair Rob Campbell says both agencies will work together closely on the plan.
We keep hearing about a separatist health system when people talk about these two organisations. The reality is that we have had a separatist health system for a long time, where too many people were receiving unequal treatment and having unequal outcomes.
Keep in mind it's an initial plan only to get the new system up while they design the first full-scale New Zealand health plan, which will be ready by 2024.
And it's 8 minutes to 6. Kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And brace yourselves, we have an update from Tip Top. This is on the discontinuing of Goody Goody Gumdrop and cookies and cream. Ben from Tip Top says, well, we're asking, why is it these flavours? Lollies, cookies, what's the deal? Ben says basically everything, unfortunately, in particular these two compared to others, have the addition of cookies and gumdrops, which exacerbates the problems. You guys have got lots to say on that. We'll get to some of it. But first, on local government, 16-year-olds, should they be able to vote? Yes, says Brian of Ngā Motu. To the longer term, he says no. Running elections should be taken away from councils, Brian reckons as well. Well, you'll be happy, Brian, that is also one of the recommendations. Someone else says young people have to wait to 18 before they can vote, buy a lotto ticket, join the police, buy alcohol or cigarettes, which all reflect the cognitive and neurological maturity of a 16-year-old. 18, they say, is young enough to vote. Another person says voting age should stay as it is. Most 16-year-olds I have encountered in my 66 years on the planet have very little political awareness. Really? Only the left-leaning Socialist Party will support a voting age at this level to attract the politically unaware vote. I don't know. Let us know what you guys think about that. Are 16-year-olds politically aware? Text us on 2101 or tweet us at checkpointrnz. Very quickly on the issue of ice cream. Hokey pokey, it's tops, this person says. Goody goody gumdrops. No, says Trent, with about 20 O's on it. Another person reckons French vanilla, that's very dull, is the best flavour. And goody goody gumdrops is the only ice cream we eat in our house. I am outraged too, that person says. I stand with you. Saved by CPR, a man whose life was saved by a bystander after a heart attack says it's a miracle he's alive. He's one of the 11% of Kiwis who survive a cardiac arrest every year. This month, Hatohone St John launched a campaign that trained over 11,000 people to perform CPR in case of an incident in the community. Our reporter Haisa Almeida has more.
It was just another day for 68-year-old Peter Demon.
I didn't feel anything at all. I was just going for a walk, and as per normal, because I had been doing quite a lot of walking. And, next minute, that was it. Woke up in hospital.
In April last year, he collapsed in a footpath in Porirua.
Fell face down on the footpath, broke my glasses, damaged my nose, and blood was everywhere.
Meanwhile, refrigeration engineer Casey Skilder and his wife were on their way to a day trip up north.
We were just driving down the road. We were going to go over to Whangārei just for the day, and just looked down over the side of the road, and there's a man lying down on the ground.
He says he didn't think twice before stopping the car and going for the rescue.
Jumped out of the car and just checked him. He wasn't breathing, and I put my head down to his mouth. I couldn't feel him breathing. I couldn't hear. I put my head on his chest. I couldn't hear his heart. He was still warm, so I thought, he's probably had a heart attack, and started just giving him chest compressions.
Mr. Skilder gave CPR before emergency services arrived to look after Peter Demon. Since then, Peter had a triple bypass surgery and a cardioverter defibrillator attached to his heart. Mr. Demon says the episode was a wake-up call.
I didn't realise the significance of it at the time. It's only when people started throwing statistics at me later, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm just so lucky.
Cardiac arrest is one of the main causes of death in New Zealand, with more than 2,000 people treated every year. Only 11% of those who suffer cardiac arrest survive. In October, St John trained more than 11,000 people around Aotearoa in CPR, with the aim of increasing the survival rate of those who have cardiac arrests in the community. Head of Community Education Jackie Tadnell says knowing CPR could be the difference between life and death.
The sooner that CPR starts, the higher the chances of survival for that person. So without CPR, their chances of survival drops by 10% each minute that it's not performed. So it's vitally important.
She says the training helps to keep real-life situations less overwhelming.
It is going to be stressful, and it's going to probably be on a loved one, but everything that you do for that person's only going to make that person better off. And that's the bit that you need to remember, is that you can only do something more for this person by giving it a go.
Peter Demon says he and Casey Skilder used to be just strangers living in the same neighbourhood, but Casey's act of courage has brought them together.
We sent out a message, if you like, to neighbours. Eventually, we found out who they were, and just asked them, if they would like to have a cup of tea, that sort of thing. And now we know each other, and it's just fantastic.
For Mr. Skilder, lending a hand is the least he could do.
I consider it like a civic duty, You just can't stand there. You can't just walk away. You've got to do something. I mean, I feel good that I could do something.
Anyone can book a CPR training through St John's website.
A lot of you have been getting in touch about all sorts of things on the program this evening. Let's start with Greyhound racing. This is our earlier interview with the Minister for Racing. The industry is on notice from the government to be more transparent and do something about animal welfare. Deb says, end dog racing now. It is cruel and inhumane. Brian and Joe from Browns Bay have got in touch, says it's not just the dogs which are killed and injured during racing. When dogs retire, they are often mistreated and poorly cared for. Greyhound racing is a barbaric sport and it should be banned. Someone else, Jan, says greyhound racing has got to be stopped. What to do with the dogs? Well, if it continues, there will be even more dogs, says Jan, that need to be rehomed. Rebecca says sports that involve watching animals suffer, such as greyhound racing, need to end. We as a society are too evolved to think that that is acceptable. Danny from Hamilton says more animals are hurt and killed by fireworks. And another listener says greyhound racing, like any other form of animal exploitation for profit or entertainment, should absolutely banned. Another listener reckons that dog control is a more important issue than banning greyhound racing. Right now, so many people have been attacked, they say, and terrorised by various breeds of dogs whose owners are irresponsible. I think people's welfare is far more important than dogs, but all governments seem very hesitant to step in, they say. On a lighter note, the debate about ice cream flavours rages on. So Tip Top's discontinuing cookies and cream and goody gumdrops. You know, you won't be able to buy it. Be in scoop shops, but not other places. This person says, screw goody gumdrops. What? Cookies and cream is what is devastating. Chewy cookie bits. Rough news. Why don't you just buy the vanilla, smash up a couple of biscuits and biff them in there, and bingo, you've got the business.
You could make goody gumdrops with a miscellaneous minty flavour and throw on some lollies.
Oh, I don't know. Not as easy. Another person says, Mark, another person has got in touch about this. It's interesting that ice cream seems to melt faster only because when you were a kid you ate it so fast and it didn't have a chance to think about melting.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Kia ora tātou. Good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. The Green Party has again urged the government to step up its condemnation of the Iranian government. About 50 protesters burned headscarves and passports outside Iran's embassy in Wellington today. There's been a wave of protest in Iran and around the world over the death in custody of Mahsa Amini, who was arrested for violating the country's dress code. The Greens Foreign Affairs spokesperson, Golriz Ghahraman, says there's nothing stopping the government taking stronger action.
We need to come into line with the rest of the world when action on Iran is concerned. And there are these very specific actions that we can take that will hurt the people most responsible for this violence and oppression.
Golriz Ghahraman wants a freeze on the assets, bank accounts and travel of people supporting violence in Iran. Elon Musk has completed his takeover of Twitter and immediately fired 2 top executives. According to US media reports, Chief Executive Parag Agrawal and Chief Financial Officer Ned Segal are no longer with the company. The purchase brings to a close a 9-month saga of will he won't he since Mr Musk, the world's richest person, began buying shares in Twitter. By the end of April, he'd agreed to buy the company for $75 billion, but in July he pulled back, citing concerns that the number of fake accounts on the platform was higher than Twitter claimed. Twitter eventually filed a lawsuit to hold him to the deal, which has now happened. Brazil's presidential challenger, left-winger Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, universally known as Lula, has pledged that if he wins this weekend's election, he'll halt deforestation in the Amazon. The BBC's Kat Weiner reports.
In an open letter to the Brazilian people, Lula says he will radically overhaul government policy on the environment. Deforestation of the Amazon has accelerated under his rival, the right-wing incumbent Jair Bolsonaro, who's been criticised for prioritising the interests of loggers and ranchers. Analysts have questioned how far Lula, if elected, would be able to meet his goal of sustainable development while maintaining other campaign commitments to the country's business sector. Polls consistently put Lula ahead of Mr Bolsonaro in the second round of the presidential election, but Sunday's race is expected to be tight.
The Tourism Minister says Aotearoa is set for a strong summer, but he acknowledges there are more challenges ahead. Roughly 145,000 overseas visitors arrived in the 4 weeks to Wednesday. Stuart Nash says that shows the demand is still there from international visitors. He says the increase will put extra pressure on tourism and hospitality workers. Mr Nash says more than 10,000 working holiday visa holders have arrived in the country, and further work is being done to improve labour shortages. Christchurch's new mayor, Phil Major, says there are more important things the council should be spending money on than upgrading the streets around the new stadium. The council's chief executive, Dawn Baxendale, has said a proposed upgrade to the streets will be put on hold despite consultation having started weeks ago. Mr Major welcomes the move, saying he suspects Ms Baxendale is listening to the concerns expressed by him and others.
If we're spending that sort of money, there's a lot better places for it to be spent. There's more roads in the east that people are still suffering 11 years after the earthquake, that need a lot more attention than these ones do at the moment.
Phil Major says it also isn't a good look when the council has said it needs help to pay for the stadium in the first place. A man attacked in Christchurch's CBD last week has died in hospital. The 61-year-old man was critically injured in the assaults in Cashel Street. An 18-year-old man has appeared in court charged with wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. The police are considering laying further charges. A Ngai Tahu leader who contributed significantly to the iwi's genealogy and settlement process has died. Terry Ryan was the secretary of Rehua Marae and the Kawai Kaitiaki of Ngai Tahu Whakapapa and authority on the Southern Iwi's genealogy. He started working for the iwi in 1974, providing critical background for the iwi's claim. Dr Ryan was also involved in drafting the legislative provision recognising Māori as an official language. He received an honorary doctorate in 2001 for his contributions to genealogy. And some Whangārei businesses are the busiest they've been since pre-COVID times, thanks to the Women's Rugby World Cup. The Black Ferns take on Wales in a quarter-final tomorrow night in the city, where 9 pool matches have already been played. Hospitality, accommodation and retail staff are preparing for another influx of fans. The Butter Factory Bar and Bistro has been so popular that owner Luke Revel has opened a second venue upstairs for the tournament.
On average, our food sales are up about 30% to between 30 and 50%.
The Northland Chamber of Commerce says the World Cup is putting millions into Whangarei's economy. However, Met Service says people planning to attend tomorrow night's game should prepare for unsettled weather. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, unravelling the mystery of New Zealand's copper butterflies. And the mystery goes back to the voyage of the Endeavour. Dan Slevin's been slaving over a hot screen for our weekend viewing, while Finn Johansson's been prone on the couch listening to some new music. For us, it's all part of the rich tapestry of a Friday night with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Kei te whakarong mai koutou ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. You're listening to RNZ National on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday to start your weekend. The northern half of the North Island from Taranaki and Taupo northwards, including Bay of Plenty. Also Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington. Cloud increasing. Isolated showers turning to scattered rain tomorrow. Heavy falls possible later tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine with high cloud. Whanganui, Taihape, Manawatu, also Wairarapa, cloudy periods. Scattered rain late tomorrow. For Nelson and Marlborough, showers turning to rain today. Some heavy falls tomorrow, then easing later. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain with some heavy falls. Thunderstorms possible from tomorrow afternoon. For Canterbury, a few spots of rain this afternoon. More extensive rain developing tomorrow, possibly heavy for a time in the afternoon and evening, and then clearing. Otago and Southland, scattered showers, mainly in the afternoons and evenings with possible thunderstorms and hail. And for Rekohu, the Chatham Islands, occasional rain or drizzle from this evening. It's 6 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora rā, Evie. No mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Hundreds of Australian Sikh volunteers are providing food and disaster relief for Victoria flood victims. The charity delivered more than 270,000 free meals to vulnerable people during 2 years of the COVID pandemic. Sikh Volunteers Australia was started by immigrants wanting to give back to their adopted country. And now they're driving hours hours to feed residents in the state hit by extreme weather events. The charity's CEO, Jasvinder Singh, says it's one less thing for distressed people to worry about.
It's kind of a mixed reaction because people are going through a very tough situation of their life, which is unexpected and not you can say a pleasant thing where anyone wants them to be. So when they found out that there is an organization or a group of people who are bringing meals for them, they are also in thanks, but also in the surprise. It's kind of mixed feeling that, wow, means you guys are here and providing us the meal. Thank you for that. We are really supportive. And at the same time, they are like in a bit of surprise that how you can come up such from a far distance and can support us. But yeah, it's a mixed feeling. People are thankful, but at the same time, they're surprised. And most of the time, our perspective is that, all right, you now have one less thing to worry about in your life. So have it, please.
Yeah, so tell me about that. What are you trying to achieve? Because you know the expression about food, people say food is love. So what are you trying to achieve by giving people these meals?
Well, providing the food is actually part of our faith, the Sikh faith. There is a concept in Sikh faith, it is called langar. Since from the inception of the Sikh religion, we have this concept in our community where everyone come together, cook together, and eat together. When we break bread with someone who even we don't know, it's an unknown person, the barriers between the person to person goes down. We have break the same bread on the same floor in the same way. That makes us equal in almost every respect. When Sikh Volunteers Australia started this free food van in 2017, our idea was to take this service out from the Sikh place of worship and put it on meals and serve the community in a way where it is appreciable and where they like it, that yes, we are being looked after, we are not alone. That is what we are trying to achieve.
So tell me about these meals. Who cooks them? What are they?
So we cook freshly vegetarian meals. We have dedicated chefs who cook them. And there are a whole lot of volunteers who are trained in food safety and handling who support the chefs. And all together, like a organized machinery, all these people, they just do cooking, cutting, preparation, and everything, and they produce the meals.
You have been giving away hundreds of thousands of meals. Did you ever imagine it would get this big?
No. When we have started this organization, we had never thought that we would be in such a place. Actually, even today, the truth is that we really don't want that anyone ever need this service. It's unfortunate that people need it. It's unfortunate that we keep on cooking, but we never had thought, and we really want that maybe in next 10 years or maybe next 5 years, this service is not required anymore. It's actually not what we have think of. But yes, things are happening. It's in requirement. People need it, and we are trying to support as well. So that's why we keep on showing every time wherever it is required.
Tell me about the work you are doing with the flood victims and feeding them.
So with the flood victims, right now our food vans are going to the Rochester. It's one of the towns which is hard stuck by the Victorian Central floods. Before that, we are going to Seymour, Benalla, and Shepparton as well from last 10 days, but we are continuously going to Rochester. The evacuation center is there. There is a center for the information. We stand up van over there. We prepare the meals back in Langbourne, van go up there, they set up, and then we start serving the community. And we are hoping that we will keep it going as long as the service is required in Rochester.
So do you just, I don't know, wake up in the morning and think something terrible has happened there, we're going to take them food, or how do you decide where you're going?
So it's like now part of our routine, because Since from the COVID lockdown, I can say that we have considered it is as our responsibility. And also, I believe there is an expectation from the community that, yes, there is an organization that can support. We have the resources now. Back in 2017, when we have purchased our first van, it was purchased by all the community members at that time in the group. Everyone chipped down $1,000, and with $31,000, we have purchased the first one. But since after that, the whole of the community, the whole of Australia is supporting us in some way. And now we consider it our moral responsibility that if anywhere something happens where we can go and reach, then why shouldn't we? We can't just sit back and watch that someone else will do that. So if there is anything we know that is about to happen or had happened, then we keep an eye on that, and we request people to let us know. Like since from this morning, there is a heavy rain falling in Melbourne region, and we are requesting people, let us know if you need any support. We will try our best to come down there.
And that was Jasvinder Singh. Vladimir Putin is warning the coming decade will be the most dangerous since the Second World War. In his latest fiery speech, he again tried to justify Russia's invasion of Ukraine and accused the West of nuclear blackmail, something he himself is guilty of. He also claimed the Russian economy had survived Western sanctions. The BBC's Steve Rosenberg has more.
His war in Ukraine has not gone according to plan. But more than 8 months in, from Vladimir Putin, there were no regrets, no remorse. He blamed the West for the conflict and made only passing reference to the human cost of his invasion.
Of course, there's been a price to pay, primarily the losses connected to the special military operation. I'm always thinking about that. There are economic costs too, but there are enormous gains. Without any doubt, what's happening now will ultimately benefit Russia and its future. It will strengthen our sovereignty.
Strength is what the Kremlin leader is trying to project. This week, he oversaw massive exercises by Russia's strategic nuclear forces. A clear message to the West: don't mess with Moscow. President Putin was reminded he'd once said that in a nuclear war, Russians would go to heaven and the enemy to hell. We're in no rush to go to heaven, are we? He asks. There's a long pause. Your silence is worrying me, he says.
I paused on purpose, so that you'd be worried.
Vladimir Putin rejected Western accusations he's been engaged in nuclear saber-rattling. Russia, he claimed, had nothing to gain from a nuclear strike on Ukraine. But the fact remains that on the day of the invasion, he'd issued a very public warning. Any country that gets in Russia's way, he said, would face consequences the like of which they'd never experienced in history.
And the warnings continue.
According to Russian official nuclear doctrine, Russia would launch a strategic nuclear strike against the United States and all the NATO countries as soon as we witness the launch of Western missiles, no matter how armed they are, against our territories. And then the whole planet will die.
Moscow may be hoping nuclear rhetoric will scare the West into reducing support for Ukraine. It hasn't so far.
The family of an American soldier killed in the Ukraine alongside Kiwi Dominic Aberlin says it means everything to them that his body has finally been returned. 24-year-old Joshua Jones was killed in August whilst fighting alongside the Ukrainian military. Now CNN has revealed they witnessed the exchange, which took place in no man's land in the Zaporizhzhia region. Clarissa Ward has this exclusive report.
On the front lines in Ukraine, he was known to his fellow fighters as Tactical Jesus, on account of his long hair and deep knowledge of the Bible. To his mom, he was simply Joshi. Tennessee native Joshua Jones was just 24 years old when he was killed fighting in eastern Ukraine back in August. His passport and Ukrainian military ID showed up on Russian social media channels soon after, but his body was never recovered. Since then, Ukrainian lawmakers Alexander Trukhin and Alexander Kovalyov have worked tirelessly to get his body back. And today, it is finally happening.
Why is it important to you to recover the body of Joshua Jones?
He's the same one hero for me like our soldiers. So we should make everything possible to give his body back to his family.
We are driving to the front line in Zaporizhia. We stop along the way to link up with military intelligence. In another car, a Russian soldier sits slumped over. He is being released today as part of a larger swap in which 10 Ukrainians were already freed. The lawmakers talk with the officers to go over the plan once more. A makeshift white flag is put together for the moment of transfer. And we're off again. This time to no man's land. A rare 2-hour ceasefire has been agreed by both sides, and time is of the essence.
So we've just arrived at the meeting point. They're waiting now for the Russians to arrive with the body.
A team of forensic investigators get ready for the task ahead. This is as far as we are allowed to go. The actual handover will happen just beyond the hill. Waiting for their return, it is eerily quiet. Only the bravest dare come out in these parts. One of the transfer team captures the moment Joshua Jones's body is brought back into Ukrainian territory as Russian forces look on. For Kovalyov and Trukhin, it's the moment they have been waiting for. Jones is now one step closer to being returned to his family. Back in the car, they show us his personal effects.
This is his personal body cross, which he was wearing. He was a very religious guy.
What's your feeling in this moment? You've been working towards this for a long time to try to get Joshua Jones back to his family.
Our feeling, we are proud of our country, of our team. We are proud of the president. And we are proud that we are saving lives because, you know, when even somebody is dying, his family continue to live. And they cannot live normally if they know that they don't have a place where to come for their son.
Thanks to their efforts, Joshua's mother, Misty Gossett in Tennessee, will soon have the chance to say goodbye to her son.
Joshua was a soldier. He was a born soldier. He was named after the Battle of Jericho, and he proved he lived up to his name so valiantly. And I feel like the weight of the world has been lifted off of me.
A name and a life that will be remembered, even half a world away.
It's 6:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. You seem to be split on the idea of whether 16-year-olds should be allowed to vote. This listener says yes to increasing wages, that's for councillors, and yes to 4 terms, yes to the lower age of 16, yes, let's do it ASAP. But someone else says 16 years voting, sure, but then they take full responsibility too. No more youth courts or hand-holding. Jean says, yep, give the vote at 16. Another listener's got in touch and says there has to be a cut-off age. Let's make it 2. They certainly have strong opinions. Some big guns have waded into the conversation about ice cream. The Minister for Workplace Relations, Immigration and Transport, and now apparently the Minister for Ice Cream, Michael Wood, says that goody gumdrop is a blight on Western civilization and sometimes the tough calls are the right calls. Yeah, nah. Apparently he's gone on to tweet about Neapolitan ice cream. Isn't that a flavour for people who can't make their minds up? Anyway, moving on. Do keep it coming. 2101. It is 21 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Security forces in Iran have again opened fire on protesters, this time near the grave of a 16-year-old who disappeared in September in Tehran, days after she was seen burning her headscarf. 3 more people have been killed in clashes. The BBC's Samira Hussain spoke to one Iranian protester who fled and is now in Pakistan.
Her death has become a symbol for a movement against the country's authoritarian regime. Moin was in his home city of Tehran when the uprising began and was in the thick of the protests.
There are protests almost every other day, and they are getting suppressed violently. And even if you're not a protester, you might get some of the shrapnels. You might get beaten up, or I know of some people who have even gotten killed.
To protect his family back in Iran, we are only using his first name and concealing his face.
There's been regular shooting at the protests. I've seen it many times. It's either with military-style bullets or with pellets. I've seen the suppression forces beating people for the sake of just beating them up.
This is the city of Saqqez, Mahsa's home, and now her final resting place. Authorities tried but failed to block protesters flocking to her grave to mark the end of the mourning period, a culturally significant moment for Iranians.
That could have easily been my sister. That could have easily been my girlfriend. There's this tyranny, and it's murderous. What I'm going to do with my conscience if I sit down? Yes, I need to bear some risks, but I need to do it for the safety of my people and my friends and my parents. If I don't do it, who's gonna?
The attempts to suppress the rage and anger of Iranians are violent and deadly. But videos being shared on social media show a country full of defiance and determined for regime change.
The new British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says he won't be attending the COP27 climate summit. Environmental groups can't believe it and say the UK government is still not taking the crisis seriously enough. King Charles also has no plans to. One place where the impact of climate change is increasingly evident is the Arctic Circle, warming faster than any place on Earth. That's where the BBC's Nick Beake went for this report.
Venture deep into the Arctic Circle and you find Svalbard. There's no place quite like it. And here, a struggle for survival. Climate change is on fast forward. Polar explorer Hilda Farmström wants to show us how her world is disappearing. Soon, an incredible sight, but one framed with sadness.
To survive as a polar bear now, I think you have to be super good at hunting, because the main source of food, the seals, they are diminishing, and the ice that both the seal and the polar bears are dependent on are diminishing. It's getting less and less ice.
This Norwegian archipelago is warming 6 times faster than the global average. There's much less ice here to reflect heat and more exposed ocean to absorb it.
And these beluga whales, they're swimming in water that's much hotter than it used to be. And all wildlife here in Svalbard is having to adapt to this hotter world. You can hear them now. It's hotter in the water, and it's hotter in the air too.
Melting here raises sea levels and affects weather patterns across the globe. In what is the northernmost settlement in the world, it's life on the edge. Houses are being moved and rebuilt. New barriers installed to stop more avalanches triggered by the thawing ground.
Wherever I look around us, I see change.
And leading polar scientist Kim Holloman tells us the war in Ukraine is now undermining the efforts to understand climate change.
The official exchange with Russian institutions is not possible at this time. Half of the Arctic is Russian coastline, and if we are unable to share knowledge and data, it will hamper our ability to understand what is happening. It will. We need each other in order to do good science.
Svalbard attracts tens of thousands of visitors every year, putting further strain on this fragile environment. But the authorities claim they're moving towards renewable energy.
Now we are in one of the 2 production sites we have here in mine number 7. We are 8 kilometers in the mine.
This is Svalbard and Norway's last coal mine, which we're told is due to close.
It makes me sad. It was a mining town, and now it's coming to an end. It's more and more of a tourist town.
For many, the phrase Disney princess conjures up a certain type of figure, probably not one too dissimilar to the classic Barbie dolls. But like Mattel, which makes Barbies, Disney has decided it's also time to be more inclusive. The BBC's Stephanie Prentice reports on Disney's latest short film.
A young girl with a dream, but struggling with what she sees in the mirror. Reflect follows the story of a plus-size ballet dancer who can't accept what's reflected in the walls of her studio.
Tight tummy, long neck.
Bianca is seen pirouetting and practicing, but the mirrors begin to envelop her. She has to find the strength to overcome her self-doubt, smashing through her personal obstacles and accepting herself and her body. The character is a far cry from classic Disney leads like Snow White, Cinderella, Jasmine and Rapunzel, and fans online were quick to react. Some called the short amazing and others emotional, with one former ballet dancer writing, "16-year-old me needed this before I quit ballet because I didn't want to be the fat girl in class anymore. I'm glad little ones will have this." Others, however, were critical, with one writing, "It's not okay to normalise obesity to children." Disney has also been criticised for promoting unrealistic body standards recently after images of the character Kate from a short named Inner Workings were shared widely, with users pointing out that her waist wasn't much wider than her neck. It's also been noted that previous plus-size Disney characters have been comedic foils or villains.
My dear, sweet child.
Including the famous Ursula the Sea Witch from the 1990s movie The Little Mermaid. She even used magic on others to help them lose weight.
This one longing to be thinner, that one wants to get the girl, and do I help them? Yes, indeed.
Fast forward to the present day, and many parents online are welcoming Reflect into the Disney canon, praising its central lesson that's in line with Walt Disney's signature quote, "If you can dream it, you can do it."
That is about all we've got time for this evening. Don't forget the Late News team will keep you updated throughout the night. Thank you for joining us on this very disappointing day where Tip Top announced it's discontinuing the 2 litres Goody Goody gum drops. Thank you for the people who commiserated with me. As for those who said that Gold Rush and Neapolitan ice cream were better flavours, perhaps you can take the weekend to reflect on your behaviour. And that includes you too, Minister. Have a great weekend. We'll be back on Monday. Catch you then.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The Green Party MP wants the government to step up its condemnation of Iran. There's been a wave of protests in Iran and around the world over the death in custody of Mahsa Amini, who was arrested for violating the country's dress code. And Golritz Gahraman wants the government to do more. Racing Minister Kieran McAnulty says he's keeping an open mind on the future of Greyhound racing until he receives a report on animal welfare concerns. And Whangārei businesses are the busiest they've been since pre-COVID times, thanks to the Women's Rugby World Cup. The Black Ferns face off against Wales tomorrow night. That's the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
On Country Life this week, they may still need their gumboots, but that's about as traditional as it gets.
You can see a countdown on my phone here of the cows in paddock 10. By the next 12 minutes, they'll all have that message. Noise will come through their collar and they will start walking out to the shed. And it will also give me an estimated arrival time.
Stepping up to high-tech dairying. Country Life, Friday at the new time of 7 during nights and Saturday morning after the 7 o'clock news on RNZ National.
Now it's time for the detail. Tonight's episode is all about building Aotearoa's largest inland port. In 20 years, it'll be the epicentre of logistics in the North Island.
I'm Sharon Brett Kelly, and today on the detail I'm in Waikato at Ruakura, and I'm standing here with the Chief Executive of Tainui Group Holdings, Chris Joblin. We're in the middle of nowhere in a way, aren't we? But we're smack bang in the middle of the Golden Triangle. But it feels like the middle of nowhere because right in front of us is a huge security gate, and then we've got another big fence here, and over to our left is a huge digger. Give me some statistics about this project, Chris.
So this will be the largest industrial development in New Zealand and probably in Australasia at the moment. Size-wise, 490 hectares. We've currently got about 300 people working on site. We've moved, the better part of 1 million cubic metres of earth to create the wetland and basically to contour the site. It's about 5.5 kilometres long and about 3.5 kilometres wide at its widest point. We're about 3.5 kilometres to the CBD of Hamilton, and we're adjacent to the Whangārei University.
Ruakura Super Hub is the largest project undertaken by Tainui Group Holdings, the tribe's commercial arm. When finished, there'll be an inland port, a warehouse zone for importers and exporters, a service centre with a green hydrogen station and a wetland. And everything here is supersized, from the machines moving the dirt to the 40,000 square metre warehouses. I'm here to find out how this ambitious logistics project is going to unlock the golden triangle of Tauranga, Hamilton and Auckland, but also why it is so significant for the iwi. So, back at the site of the wetland with Chris Joblin.
What we've built here is a 10-hectare wetland which will take all the water from the site and basically bring it through a series of effectively streams and lakes. This is going to be open to the public through a series of boardwalks, and so what we're doing is bringing to life a logistics and industrial ecosystem, but how we do that also has a foundation in improving the environment at the same time.
Wait for this big one to go past.
So you'll see here we've got a 100-tonne dump truck that's just coming past us now with carrying a bit of sand.
So all women driving these machines?
Yeah. A lot of the people that are driving these huge trucks, they are women. So one of the things that we're really proud of too here is the opportunities for training people, and we've just had a grader drive past us, and the young lady that we're driving that would have been trained on this site, and driving the grader is probably one of the most skilled jobs within the earth moving part of what we're doing here.
Would she be Tainui or not necessarily?
A lot of the people here that are getting these opportunities are Waikato Tainui tribal members, but there are also people from the wider community as well.
16 years ago, what would this have looked like?
So 16 years ago, this was basically a dairy farm milking circa 600 cows.
And owned by Tainui?
Yeah, it was owned by the tribe, so this piece of whenua came back to the tribe in the 1995 Raupatu settlement with the Crown, and so what we're doing now is bringing this to the highest and economic, best use.
I'm taking a tour of Ruakura Super Hub with Chris and Tainui Group Holdings Supply Chain Strategy Director Dave Christie. Where are we?
So we're on the old Ruakura Road, and you can see directly in front of us is the East Coast Main Trunk, which is the main railway link between Tauranga and Auckland. And then over our right shoulder is the new Waikato Expressway, which is a brand new State Highway 1. And so the East Coast Main Trunk and the Waikato Expressway border the Ruakura development.
If you didn't know what this place was, it just looks like a rural thing with an old house over there, an old house behind us, and a bit of roadworks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's the challenge for us, I guess, at Tainui, is that we believe this is going to be unlocking the Golden Triangle. But at the moment, when you look at it, as you say, you see kind of farmland, maybe a few sheds being built. But in fact, when you look at this in 20 years in the future, it'll be the epicentre of logistics in the North Island.
Where are we going to? Oh, the inland port.
So we're going to drive through into the logistics precinct, which will then take us into the Ruakura inland port.
So we're just driving along, it looks like a very new road here.
Exactly.
few trucks coming and going, but it's pretty quiet.
Yeah, so it's we've only got one tenant operational at the moment, the first inaugural tenant for Ruakura, which is Peter Baker Transport Express. All the other trucks you can see here are construction vehicles.
So massive warehouses.
Yes, it's all about the connectivity between what currently in New Zealand are disparate supply chains. So it's the import supply chain where you bring in goods from offshore, almost always in containers. And those containers then have to flow to the distribution centres where they get devanned. And normally all that activity happens in Auckland. So what we're doing is saying, no, well, given the flows that go through the Golden Triangle, we'll bring that volume into Ruakura here, we'll devan it in Ruakura in those big warehouses you're seeing. And then when those containers are empty, instead of them flowing all the way back to the ports, we'll turn them around, take them to an exporter who's right next door, we'll load them up, and then they'll head off to the port full. So it's a much more efficient, productive, less wasteful supply chain. So here we are driving onto the inland port.
The inland port, so what is going on here? There's a whole lot of trucks creating a road.
So we're creating a hard stand which will allow us to hold the containers that will flow into and out of Ruakura Super Hub. We're developing 2 rail sidings which allow us to bring trains off the East Coast main trunk and bring the trains in here, park them, and we can take containers off them or put containers onto them. If they're an import container, they'll be taken to the warehouses, which we'll go and see shortly in the logistics precinct, then they'll get unloaded or devanned. And then the containers will get reloaded with export product, come back here, we'll put it on the train, and then they'll head off to the ocean ports.
And how far away is it?
The construction here will be completed this side of Christmas and will be open early in the new year.
When it opens, how many containers will be
Sure,
coming
great
and
question.
going?
Yeah, exactly. When it's first opened, we project our capacity will be about 60,000 TEU, which is TEU's another acronym we use in logistics, 20-foot equivalent unit.
Like a shipping container?
Yeah, so it's a 20-foot shipping container, and then you have an FEU, which is a 40-foot shipping container. But once we develop the full 30 hectares, we think we can get to about 1 million TEUs. Now, to give you some comparison, when Auckland was at its peak, it was just under 1 million before the COVID and all the challenges Auckland Port had, and Port of Tauranga is 1.3 million. But this will be a main linkage point to those 2 key points.
So where are those TEUs going at the moment?
Most import TEUs end up in Auckland, and then they go to those distribution centres in Auckland. And that then leads to the third supply chain, which is the domestic supply chain, and all that cargo and freight and goods flow out of Auckland all the way through New Zealand